Right. Wonder if we should get started. We have so much to talk about.
We'll have so much to talk about. Welcome, everyone. To our webinar today, we have so much to discuss on toxic fitness culture and reshaping your relationship with fitness and sport. My name is Rebecca Graham. You can call me Becky. I go by Becky, and I am a registered psychotherapist in a qualified role. I am a current student at the Center for Psychology and Emotion Regulation. I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and on top of that, I am a trauma-informed weightlifting specialist, and love to help clients redefine their relationship with fitness and what that may look like in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Becky. Hi, everyone. I'm Cortney Lacroix. I am a registered psychotherapist here at the clinic. In addition to that, I also did a master's in human kinetics with applied sports psychology prior to becoming a psychotherapist. I was kind of chatting with Becky before our presentation, just explaining that one of the reasons I actually decided to become a psychotherapist was because I saw the tremendous need for more support in athletes around mental health and what I could do in that role. So that kind of led me to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. And really align with you on that, Courtney. You know, you have actually been a source of inspiration to pursue my master's degree as well in counseling psychology, and seeing this need, seeing this gap of, the importance of fitness in your life, and also how fitness can be a double-edged sword. So we're gonna talk about that and discuss that as we move forward this. And speaking of discussion, Courtney and I were also talking behind all of your backs, and we're really hoping to have you engage in conversation with us. So please feel free to, light it up in the chat and participate fully in the next hour that we have together. All right, so what are the objectives of the next hour together? We're going to go into some further detail about understanding toxic fitness culture and sport culture. We're going to discuss factors that maybe play a part in toxic fitness culture and sport culture. Maybe some things that are happening internally, so our own thoughts and beliefs, and also how our environment and the things that we see and the things that we are part of can contribute to this, and also how to improve your relationship with fitness and sport. And before we go into further detail with this, Courtney and I were also talking about, some of the beliefs that we're bringing forward into this topic as well. And, we really believe that hypervigilance right now with food, with fitness, with weight and health is harming people in significant and very profound ways right now. We believe that people are not required to pursue health in order to be deemed of worth, of love, respect, and belonging. We also believe that nobody wins when we see a healthy body only as a thin one. We believe that pleasure is a force essential to liberation, especially when it comes to fitness and sport. We believe that healing your relationship with food and your body, especially when it comes to fitness and sport, is a vital part of feeling whole. We also believe that anti-fat bias, body oppression, societal inequities make caring for your body quite difficult, if not really, really difficult for some. And your suffering is not your fault. So we are bringing forward these biases as we kind of move forward and discuss, the factors that not only contribute to this, but also maybe what can we do about it? What can we do about it as individuals? What can maybe we can do about it on a larger scale from an industry perspective, or maybe from a coaching perspective as well? So I guess the question we have for all of you before we begin, when we say and ask, what is toxic fitness and sport culture? What does that mean to you?
I'm just getting a note from one of the participants saying that the chat is disabled. So I don't know if there's a way to change that. I wonder even if people just want to put, like, if you're able to send something towards me and I can even read them out loud.
Yeah, totally. Or even perhaps even perhaps maybe thinking about, like, what does this mean to you? What is it? Oh, I see it in the Q&A.
Yeah, so that's where
Yep.
I'm reading. A lot of people are saying the Q&A works. So if people want to just
Perfect.
type their answers in the Q&A, and I can even just read them out loud.
Awesome.
What do you think toxic fitness and sport culture mean? It can mean so many different things to so many different people. There is no right or wrong answer here.
Mhm.
I think for me, toxic fitness and sport culture really has a lot of different components to it. But I think for me, it's when we start to focus on the areas of that's specifically related to our body and don't have anything to do with our mental well-being or other aspects. So I'm getting, here we go. Fake social media posts and toxic positivity, absolutely. Doing yourself more harm than good with attitudes and beliefs, 100%. Focusing on weight, inches, loss, and thinness. All of these are spot on, absolutely. Having pressure to look skinny, overemphasis on health, and that being defined as how we look. Yes, we're going to talk about that. Lifting really heavy weights is the only way to be considered fit, and influencers in the gym. Oh yes, we will be talking about all of these. Awesome.
Yes. Thanks so much, everyone. So before we dive into more of what toxic fitness culture is, maybe perhaps in the Q&A now, you can let us know and let's have a discussion of the benefits of moving your body. What are some benefits of moving your body in a joyful way?
Mental health, more energy. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Fun. Yeah, it's simply about the enjoyment. Feels good. Sleeping better.
Yes.
Managing stress, boosting self-confidence, longevity, maintaining wellness.
Yes.
And
yes.
Moving your body in a joyful way equals happiness, mental clarity, energy, connection to others. Yes, there's such a social component there. Fun, wellness, boosting your energy, having a break from screens. Oh my goodness, yes.
Mm-hmm. These are great.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Yep. The benefits of moving your body include everything that all of you have just mentioned. It can include improved heart and lung function, improved muscular and skeletal strength, improvements in your self-esteem and mood, and one of you brought up connection, community. That's such an important component as well. It has such social value. So, okay, let's think about the word expectation. What is your current relationship with that word? And if you think about expectation and fitness, some of you have already kind of highlighted that. Is there a certain expectation that you feel like you have to meet, like in this relationship you have with fitness right now? Take a moment to kind of maybe explore your relationship with that word.
Even adding in with sport too, like expectations around what do others expect from you? What do you expect from yourself when you're, whether it's fitness or sport related?
Yeah. When we see fitness as mandatory, something that we must do, that in and of itself is what we're kind of leading into, segueing into when it comes to toxic fitness culture. This almost like this dangling carrot industry where it feels like you're maybe entering fitness or incorporating fitness in your life for health-related reasons. And factors outside of your control, factors that we may not be able to control, are making your goals seem less attainable the more you do something, perpetuating this system of almost like a vicious cycle of feeling like you need to stay in it, and that you're never ever going to be able to attain your goals, and you're never going to be able to be strong enough, fit enough, healthy enough, or maybe even almost like you are not worthy enough of achieving a goal that's set for you when you enter the fitness industry. Yeah. And when exercise and expectations go hand in hand, that you have certain expectations of yourself when you begin to exercise, or expectations of fitness and what it can do for you, it's or it almost turns into exercise as compensatory behavior. And the relationship between this and exercise levels, of course, it can vary between individuals. And it really depends on the reason why people start to begin to exercise in the first place. However, when we start to exercise and there's really rigid expectations around that, it almost perpetuates body image concerns, eating disorders, and other mental health concerns. It's almost like exercise can turn into the opposite action. So I wanted to enter into the conversation about toxic fitness culture by getting you to think about expectations before we arrive there.
Yeah. And I think people have brought up some really great points in the chat, just talking about like this all or nothing kind of mentality of I need to be the best or the highest achiever, or I failed, or even this idea like we talked about around weight loss or being thin, as well as just kind of how we go about exercise means being in a smaller body. And if that's not what happens, then I'm not good enough. And we kind of start to internalize these beliefs about ourselves based on that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And that right there, those thoughts, those belief patterns, that is toxic fitness culture. Toxic fitness culture, it's almost like a social construct that promotes and reinforces ableism, fat phobia, body shaming, and body hate under the guise of fitness to work towards ultimate health. Toxic fitness culture limits access, thus perpetuating the lack of access of care to safe spaces as well. Toxic fitness culture was built on a system bound to ensure your failure, to keep you in a vicious cycle of always searching for the next best thing, the fastest way to look a certain way, creating a billion upon billion of dollar industry each year, completely funded by lack of qualified professionals, unregulated supplementation, and detox programs full of promises and embedded with lies for profit. What are some examples of fitness culture? How does this show up? I've got, Cortney and I were thinking about this, and I was like, I could probably put 150 ways of how this shows up. So let's talk about this, and please put it in the Q&A as well. Some examples of how toxic fitness culture may show up: the promotion of fitness for the sole purpose of weight loss, the belief that fitness has a look, personal trainers who are unwilling or unable to modify exercises that support your unique body, the belief that you are not working hard enough if you haven't achieved thinness. That came up in the chat, so thank you for putting that in. Personal trainers who don't believe you when you need to stop and encourage you to push through pain. The belief that beating up your body makes for a good workout. Only being seen as an expert because you are seen in a smaller body. Having a limited view of what fitness maybe is. Believing working out is more important than listening to what your body needs. The belief that your body has to get smaller and toned when you engage in fitness, and if it doesn't, you're doing something wrong.
There's some really great ones in the chat, Becky, as well. There's one here that's like absolute gold, having before and after photos Oh
Oh,
my.
good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
so much for putting that in the chat. Yeah, tell us what else. How does toxic fitness culture show up, or what have you noticed? Right, cultivating fitness spaces that aren't accessible or affirming to a diverse group of bodies and humans. What else? Making fitness overly complicated, right? To show authority or maybe perhaps expertise.
I think I had mentioned as well before, like even just the clothing that you're supposed to wear when, working out. There's some, not all, but some clothing companies that, will like make their products that like accentuate certain parts of your body to make it look a certain way to fit within that fitness look.
Yeah, for sure. We were talking about like, yeah, different shades on to accentuate different body parts, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Someone else had mentioned too in the chat, fitness magazines and site with only like Barbie doll bodies. Absolutely. And we're going to show some pictures in a bit that kind of show exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah, exactly. And even perhaps, thinking that diet and exercise are the only ways to take care of ourselves, right? There are numerous pillars of health and wellness from a holistic lens that incorporates so much more than that. They're two very important pillars, of course. And there are other ways too that we need to nourish and take care of ourselves and our bodies.
Right. So segueing into toxic sport culture, very similar to toxic fitness culture. I named it push mentality. I don't know if that's actually a word, but when I use this word, I'm kind of thinking of pushing your body past its limits. And this can look or can come up in a few different ways. So one being with nutrition and vitals, like if you're not fueling your body with the food that it needs or hydrating, things like, over exercise, you're sweating can lead to electrolyte imbalances. This is different for everyone. Same with nutrition, right? When you're thinking about how are you feeding yourself in your day to day. And now if you're starting to integrate exercising or a 2-hour sport practice, that needs to be taken into consideration when you're thinking about how you're fueling and hydrating your body. Another piece of it is that, oh, go ahead, Becky.
When I think of push mentality, I also think of, like maybe you as well and the participants have had these thoughts before, right? I have to exercise even when I am injured, even when I am tired. I exercise every day and I feel guilty if I miss one. I must always do more than I did the last time I worked out. More. I make excuses, to miss social events or to study in order to exercise. Like these are all, kind of within the realm of this push mentality. I exercise to compensate for something.
And
right?
even further than that, I think in some sport capacities, you actually get penalized if you miss a practice or if you aren't giving it your all at practice. Or in a game even, right? And so again, that kind of leads into lack of recovery time. Resting and recovery is actually a really important part of not only your health, but even bettering yourself and your performance. And by pushing past that or not actually taking that rest and recovery, it can actually lead to injury and burnout or like decreasing your performance. So it's actually having the opposite effect of what people think it is. And then the other piece, which Becky, I think, highlighted was around injuries, where people will push through an injury. I think protocols are a lot better than what they used to be. I think of concussions specifically, like someone gets hit, they're knocked out for a minute. It's like, okay, keep playing. It's a lot better than what it was before, but there's still kind of this idea that unless you have like broken your leg or something, you just need to suck it up and keep going in some spaces. And I think I had mentioned this to Becky before. One of the athletes that I've talked to before shared, that they were getting cortisol shots in their shoulder before every football game because that's what was required. That's what they needed to do to be part of the football team. Even though they were injured, there was risk of them getting cut or losing their scholarship. So there's all these external, or the team needs me. So there's all these kind of external pressures that can happen as well. Specifically in sport too, when we're looking at weight classes like wrestling or boxing, athletes can sometimes take really extreme weight control methods, restricting food and fluid that can lead to dehydrating, and that can have some serious health consequences, both physically and mentally.
Mhm.
Looking at body image and disordered eating, I mean, this can happen in all sports, but in particular, when we're looking at those sports where people are judged on their aesthetic or their appearance, like gymnastics, figure skating, diving, the risk of that just skyrockets in terms of doing everything that you possibly can to fit into this box. I remember one athlete that I worked with sharing, they were absolutely devastated because their coach had made a comment that, well, their body type just wasn't meant to be a gymnast. Like, so that can absolutely destroy someone if their identity is part of their identity is being that athlete.
Yeah. In the chat, it said one person mentioned physical injuries are so normalized in sports and a lot of permanent damage, even on children's bodies.
Oh yeah. Think about wrestling and how many of them like go into it even just knowing that they're going to have injuries, and that's just part of it, right? Like there's no resolution to it. You're right, it's so normalized.
It is.
Yeah. And then the last piece, I mean, I could go on any of these topics for a period of time, but the last piece is kind of more so targeted towards female athletes and sexualization. So kind of this idea that sex sells, or it's a woman first and an athlete second, and athletes are sexualized on the cover of magazines. Sometimes their uniforms are revealing. I think about volleyball athletes who are like being asked to wear like short shorts in high school. Like, what if someone wants to play volleyball, but they're not comfortable with that? Even the Norwegian beach volleyball team a couple of years ago, I think, was fined for not wearing a bikini in beach volleyball, but yet the men are allowed to play in shorts and a tank top. Like, how is that fair? So I think there's a lot of gender inequality, discrimination, and even stereotypes that can come up in sports. But I'll leave it at that for this webinar.
Thanks, Courtney. Let's talk about the factors that play a part in toxic fitness and sport culture.
These are just to name.
Yeah, sorry, Court, continue.
I was just gonna say, these are just to name a few. There's myths about fitness and sport, there's body image, culture, there's different types of goals and types of motivation. So we're gonna kind of go through each one and talk about them a little bit more in depth.
Yeah. Let's talk about myths, Courtney.
Oh gosh.
So I would, right, I also would love to hear. We're going to go into a little bit of detail with each one of these. However, Courtney and I have also been talking. This could probably be like an endless podcast discussion over myths about fitness and sport, or maybe a couple part series as well. As we discuss these, we would also love to hear in the Q&A, myths that maybe you have challenged yourself, or maybe myths that maybe you believed before, and maybe it's different now. We would love to hear that. So, Courtney, I need to sweat for it to be considered like a really good workout.
Yeah, you're right, Becky. You're right. Just kidding.
No, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I think, again, this kind of goes back to my piece around nutrition and hydration, where like there's so many factors that go into how your body's working in a workout. It shouldn't be this, one piece of information that's sharing how much, how hard you're working based on an external measure. And this can become potentially really dangerous, I would imagine, if, you're not actually hydrated and you're not sweating, but you have this belief that you need to sweat for it to be considered a good workout. And so then you push yourself even further, and how detrimental that could be on your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And when focusing on components of fitness, we'll talk about this a little bit later on as well when it comes to goals. When we focus on components of balance, flexibility, fall prevention, coordination, accuracy. When we focus on these things, workouts don't need to look a certain way and be of the highest intensity, 10 out of 10 all the time in order for it to be effective, right? If we consider even, working out our brains and taking a mindful moment for a minute or two, and how effective that is for cognition and brain function, you can perform the same thing physically with your body and have profound impact with different types of workouts where you may not sweat at all. Right?
Yeah, I think of things like yoga or Pilates or that kind of stuff where,
yeah. What about going out for a walk with your dog? What about playing catch with your kids in the backyard?
What about cleaning the house?
Well, that gets me sweating, but
yeah.
Movement.
Yeah.
If we think of the word movement and start to expand our horizons of what it can look like and what it can feel like for us, for it to be effective, may not include sweating buckets at all.
Yeah.
No
pain, no gain. I think this is your favorite slogan, Becky.
Yes. Signs and symptoms that you may experience yourself if you have seen this before, or maybe you have related to this before. Please, Cortney, hold me back if you need to. Pushing through joint pain, pushing through neck or back pain, pushing through muscular and ligament injuries, pushing through stress fractures, pushing through friction burns and bruising, pushing through increased callus formations, pushing through exhaustion. I'm not sure if there are more benefits to that than not.
I would need to see the evidence for that. I think I'm a little biased, but I definitely tend to lean more on your side that that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it almost goes into myth number 5, the importance of rest and listening to our bodies, and how unique that is to the individual in terms of listening to our bodies, right? In terms of rest and fitness, that is where the work happens. After each workout that we do, let's say we're going into a strength training regime, what happens physically is when you strength train, small muscular tears happen in our muscles, which can cause muscle soreness, right? Maybe perhaps you have pushed your body in a way where there's a lingering effect after you work out, right? Maybe perhaps you did something new, or maybe perhaps, you lifted maybe a little bit heavier, right? There might be a little bit of lingering, delayed onset muscle soreness. The rest is where the muscles can repair, right? So this no pain, no gain mentality perpetuates injuries. It can perpetuate mental health disorders. It is such a concern when, and I think something particularly maybe participants to think about, right? When you feel the need to push through pain, what is happening there, right? And how can we challenge this myth? By listening to our bodies more, recognize the need for important rest to repair, right? Properly fueling and hydrating ourselves, especially during those rest days before and after exercise sessions. Being flexible enough to skip an exercise or take consecutive days off.
Well, just right? to kind of drive home that point in when you were saying, what is it that's stopping you from kind of listening to your body? I think there's a couple things in the chat that kind of point to beliefs that might underlie that. And so one is more, longer, faster is better. If I quit or if I skip a scheduled workout, then I'm bad, or I always have to go, so
where, with that myth, are our exercise beliefs and expectations, back to that word expectations, rational? Where did this come from, right? Why
Yeah, this
do I
leads me
want
to a whole other, like, we're not innately
I
born
know.
with these beliefs. Like, we are socialized to, and these myths are reinforced, whether it's like, coaches or trainers actually saying these things, or just the subliminal messages we get in our day to day by just walking through a grocery store and seeing magazines.
Yeah, yeah. And why, to challenge this myth, why do I think I need to exercise? Exercise is not mandatory. So where's that coming from, right? Yeah.
Athletes need to look a certain way. Someone also wrote in the chat another myth that I think kind of correlates with this, like larger bodies are unfit. It's kind of the same thing, like, oh, well, like swimmers have to have like broad shoulders and then be lean, but and like all athletes need to be muscular and toned. But if you're a female athlete, not too toned, because then you start to look masculine, and that's not okay. And so there's just like a whole kind of box that people need to fit into, both in the fitness and sport world. And if you don't fit into that box, then you need to bend over backwards and do everything that you possibly can to fit into that box.
Yeah, yeah. Myth number 4, working out helps with weight loss. I think with this one, I think that this myth has been around for the longest, right? And maybe perhaps going back to your lived experience of the participants here, if you've ever joined a studio or a gym, what was the number one reason why you joined in the first place?
What is people's like the most common New Year's resolution?
Yeah, exactly, right? When we work out from a health-based perspective and when we start to gain strength, there are numerous things that happen physically. Increased bone density, right? Proper functioning of our organs, proper functioning of our cardiovascular system, right? And when we gain muscle, I want you to think of the word density. So think about if you're standing on your feet and your feet are closer together. If I came over and I tried to push you over, it would be easier if you were standing in a wider stance with your feet maybe hip to shoulder distance apart, knees bent, core braced, shoulders down and back with a proud chest, right? You're taking up more space, feeling stronger in that position, right? And more dense. It's going to be harder to push you over. Right? When you work out, I want you to think about that you are building your body in a stronger position to handle the load that life hands to you. In terms of muscle weighs more than fat, that's really looped into this myth as well. Muscle doesn't weigh more than fat. Muscle is more dense than fat. So what may happen and what will happen when you work out and you gain strength and endurance and power and speed and stamina is that your weight will probably increase.
I love the dramatic pause there.
And it's we've had numerous members smash scales to have this visual reminder that if we focus on working out solely for the primary reason of weight loss, you are missing all the components of what exercise can do for your health in and of itself. So not only are you going to challenge this myth of working helps with weight loss, we're going to have to challenge the myth that working out and a numbers-based system, weight, calories, Fitbits, tracking things on, we were not going to go there. Courtney and I told each other we're not going to go there.
That's another webinar.
Yeah, tracking may not make sense, right? As your health starts to improve. Yeah.
Keep it rolling. I feel like we have.
I know we have so much to talk about. Myth number 5. Persistent soreness is a good thing. Has anyone maybe been in that position where they have maybe pushed through muscle soreness before, right?
I also think that's so reinforced too. If we go
Totally.
back to myth number 2, right? Like, oh, this is a good thing that I feel sore.
Yeah, for sure. And that's our bodies telling us something, right? That's our bodies telling us that, yeah, maybe we did something new, maybe we pushed, beyond our current threshold or current limits, and we're not working inside of them, right? It's a signal that your body certainly needs to rest and repair, right? And rest is essential. Recovery is essential to get stronger in more ways than one. It's almost like we have to sort of eliminate the black and white thinking, right? This perfectionist thinking about exercise, and the thinking about almost how to start successfully including exercise, and developing a healthy relationship with rest as well, right? What does this balance mean, right? And why is it so important? If we push through muscle soreness and fatigue, it's probably going to be counterproductive.
Yeah. And I think, again, there's so many more myths that can come up. Like someone else just wrote in the chat, I think that I need to feel sore to know that I work hard enough and that I'm doing enough, right? So that's like a whole other myth that comes up, but I think there's probably thousands of them that we could go through.
Yeah. When you include rest, especially when you're particularly sore, the benefits of that include better ability to manage your emotions, better mobility and injury prevention, overall improvement in mood, strength, body image satisfaction, and quality of life. So these things happen when we rest and when we recover. It's just as important as movement of itself as well. How does body image play a role?
Yeah. So when we think about body image, it's really about people's thoughts, perceptions, and attitudes about their physical appearance. How do you see yourself? How do you feel about your body? And this is how the National Eating Disorders Association categorizes it. And then to push that a little bit further, they talk about how in our Western culture, girls often feel pressured to succumb to the societal appearance ideal. So sometimes referred to as the thin, beauty, or cultural ideal, where boys are faced with social pressures to be lean and muscular. So again, we fall between these parallels where girls have a specific box they need to fit into and boys have a specific box that they need to fit into. And that is just so like unrealistic and just not how we as humans work. And I even think about when we look at where we're at now, maybe compared to where we used to be, I think of so many athletes or even people in general talking about this. I think about working with retired athletes who said, oh, well, when I was an athlete, I was like so much more fit and so much more thin and I weighed less. And it's like, yeah, and you were a different age, you had different you were doing like 2-hour practices every day, and that's no longer what you're doing, and that's okay. Like different priorities in your life. And also like when it comes to kind of changing that, I guess, belief when we're just talking about fitness, right? Oh, well, when I was younger, I was thinner, or when I was younger, and it's like, again, hormone changes, age differences, different things going on in your life, like bodies change. That's normal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What about culture? There's a certain mentality in fitness, and we like to call it hustle culture. So it's the idea that we need to override our body's physical needs to stop and rest. This is a really damaging concept in fitness. This is what leads to injury, a distrust in your own internal sensations and your own internal kind of guidelines. And then what we see is a dependence on the environment, right? For the validity of your own experience and intensities, right? It goes back to that no pain, no gain mentality, right? And if you do find yourself experiencing, this this hustle mindset, or you find yourself trapped in it, right? Like I need to do more. What I'm doing is not enough, right? I think it's a really important discussion to have, whether it be with a qualified professional, a certified personal trainer, your psychotherapist, right? I think it's important to discuss how to best manage and challenge this. Right? We all have our own individual reasons for this behavior, and it's important to identify these and develop ways of challenging them, right? If you find yourself deep into the hustle culture where you feel like what you're doing simply isn't enough, especially when it comes to fitness, if you find yourself over exercising, what you can do to challenge this is try to cut down on the amount that you do. Write a pros and cons list of changing your exercise behavior. What are you concerned about if you step away from the hustle mentality, right? Maybe perhaps start using alternative activities. So we'll talk about this as well, joyful movement versus exercise as well. Culture also includes the aesthetic culture. So Court and some of you in the chat have already mentioned this idea that fitness has a look. And right now, unfortunately, it's white, it's thin, and it's visible. It's visible in muscle, toned, defined. And this goes along with the hustle mentality culture of no excuses. That it is.
If you don't look this way, it's your fault.
Exactly.
And
no excuse. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, can I add about how, and I think someone had mentioned this in the chat as well, that it promotes this idea around health. This is healthy. And so it's okay to obsess over it because it's healthy versus, actually what they're promoting is thinness. They're framing it.
When I see these photos and how much of a significant impact this may have on us, even without us knowing, these types of photos that we see in culture right now can lead to a deterioration in relationships with ourselves and with others. It can perpetuate symptoms of wanting us to withdraw and isolation, depression, anxiety, guilt, unbalanced occupation and poor performance, negative self-image. It's all connected.
Yeah. I mean, when I see these photos, right, like I see the sexualization of female athletes, I see exactly what we were talking about in regards to that visible muscle with in fitness, and then that idea of like the macho man.
Yeah.
And these are just unrealistic standards.
Yeah. Totally agree. I'm so sorry, Courtney. I had to change it.
That's okay. That's okay.
So with this in mind, let's talk about goals. Let's talk about the difference between fitness goals and body image goals. Fitness goals, I like to relate back to components of fitness, things that require skill, things that require practice to get better at, patience, things that require you to stick to it, consistency, building your own self-trust and your competency and your ability to do things. Fitness goals can include speed, getting faster, endurance, doing something for longer, strength, being able to lift something up, energy, being able to keep up with the people we love, waking up with a little bit more energy, community, like you mentioned, being part of something. We all want to be part of a tribe some way, somehow. Yeah. What about body image goals, Courtney?
I mean, yeah, they're really, and I think a lot of people highlighted this at the beginning when we talked about expectations, right? Weight loss, being toned, trying to look like someone else. So the person that you see on a magazine, your appearance over your function. And again, that goes back into where injuries can happen, or pushing yourself past those limits, working out through an injury or an illness. So, and then those feelings of like guilt or shame when we don't follow through with those things. And then all of this is very reinforced as well, just in things that we hear, that we see, that we say to ourselves.
I would love to hear in the Q&A as well. If we sliced the right side of this chart away, what would be a particular fitness goal that you would want to achieve for yourself if you take the body image goals away?
I also think it's really worth us talking about motivation as well. Again, maybe this is me channeling my inner sports psychology background. But when we look at types of motivation, I mean, the two main ones that we can think of are internal and external motivation. So internal motivations are things that kind of come within. So feeling proud, doing something simply because you enjoy it, feeling that sense of competence or fulfillment and achievement. Whereas external goals are things like trying to fit into a certain clothing size, doing it because you're going to win money. I mean, I hear about these like weight loss challenges, and you win, you have to put in a certain amount of money and you win if you lose a certain amount of weight or the most weight. In sports, winning a trophy or even getting praise from others, like those are all external forms of motivation. So both of these can be motivating factors to doing what we do. But extrinsic motivations, so external motivations, can actually strengthen or weaken our internal motivation. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. So an example of the external motivation weakening the internal is that, let's say someone's only playing their sport because they have a scholarship. And that actually starts maybe to take away from the enjoyment that they used to have in the sport. Or if we're looking at the opposite, so an example of an external situation motivating internal, it might be like getting praise from a coach on something that you've been working really, really hard on. So you get both the external motivation as well as that like internal feeling proud or that sense of competence. But overall, what we see is that internal motivation is actually what's going to produce the best results or keep you going.
Great point that you brought up. And, I've heard more times over, I think the last couple months than ever before, almost people taking this sense of not feeling motivated enough themselves and seeing that as a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
So I really like how you kind of focus on this internal and external, because with this internal type of motivation, perhaps we also see more sustained commitment as well towards the things you're trying to achieve in life.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's where I think of, like that New Year's resolution, there's probably a lot of external motivations there. And then we see kind of the drop off real quick, not too long after the new year.
Yeah. So with all this in mind, what do we do about it? How do we improve our relationship and with fitness and with sport? We have a couple of ideas here, and I feel like this could be podcast number 73. When it comes to improving your relationship and with fitness and with sport, and what it looks like and what it feels like for you, we suggest beginning with figuring out what joyful movement is. Figure out also what it means to listen to your body. Use a critical lens. Figure out where maybe the urges to exercise come from, or your thoughts or your beliefs came from surrounding exercise and the need and the want to do it. Just a reminder that exercise is not mandatory. Improving your relationship with fitness and sport will also perhaps, you'll have to start reconsidering your relationship with rest and recovery as well. And also your goals and the types of motivation that Cortney mentioned. Here are a few ideas and reasons to move and to incorporate movement in your life that have absolutely nothing to do with how you look or with any type of numbers whatsoever. Reasons to move can include improving your balance, to live longer, to breathe deeper, to connect to others, to develop a routine, to feel safer in your body, and maybe perhaps discharging pent-up energy. If you've ever done a kickboxing class before, Feels really good to release emotion, perhaps maybe in a really healthy and positive way for you. When it comes to joyful movement versus exercise, and I put versus in here because there are certainly some differences when it comes to it. Movement has less boundaries, less rules. It doesn't really have a goal, right? All movement counts. Dancing, walking your dog, cleaning the house like Cortney mentioned. I get sweaty doing that, but that's okay. Going for swims, gardening, biking. And I just kind of noticed as I was talking about that, like my body language changed. Like these things, when I think about it, really bring joy and purpose in my life. I absolutely love gardening, for example. And I don't really think about that as exercise. I love to do it. And it helps me move.
Yeah, I think about even just like the environment that you're in. Like I love paddleboarding and kayaking simply because I'm on the water. So same thing, like I don't even think about how it's related to, it's a form of exercise. It's really just more so like, I love this.
And almost entering, in DBT, we talk about entering a flow state when it comes to mindfulness and doing one thing at a time and really, immersing ourselves in in the experience we're living. So joyful movement and mindfulness can go hand in hand as well, focusing on one thing at a time, and, dancing to a song that you love so much, or maybe perhaps doing movement with people that you love as well and celebrating that. Exercise, on the other hand, may be a little bit more goal-oriented. It may be centered around fit, frequency, intensity, time, and type, right? So the duration, so how long you may perhaps be exercising for. The intensity, so an RPE scale stands for rate of perceived exertion. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling right now? And the type of exercise as well. And there's all different types. Resistance training and cardiovascular training, particularly within a studio setting or a gym setting, are the most common too. And you can decide. You can decide to do either or both. It I think it's the most important thing to go back to your intrinsic motivation and the goals you're trying to achieve with your life. And I call these red flags. It's okay if you don't want to exercise. It's not mandatory. And some reasons why you may not want to do that and focus on joyful movement instead is maybe perhaps you're tired from working a long day. Maybe you feel physically stuck when you think of an exercise plan. So maybe now's not the time. You're not sleeping well, or maybe you're perhaps sick and unwell. So what you can focus on is your relationship with rest and recovery. It may be also time to start thinking about expanding your view of health and performance as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we kind of highlighted some of these throughout, but when we talk about health and performance, a lot of time what comes up is nutrition and exercise. And there's so much more to it than that, right? When we look at different forms of movement like yoga, stretching, making sure that your physical body is taken care of in other ways than just exercise, like getting a massage or physio or acupuncture if that's available to you. Noticing your sleep, like that has a huge impact on, motivation. It has an impact on our mental well-being. So that's another area. And even just our general mental health, how that has an impact. And there's almost a, I don't even know how to kind of a give and take relationship with that when it comes to our mental health and fitness and sport. It can enhance it or it can inhibit it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I really like how you highlighted the importance of sleep, and mental health and levels of stress as well. Fitness and sport, when you engage in them, is stress, right? So the more stressed you are, and you add more stress, it may be time also to expand your view on different forms of movement and what yoga or stretching, and focusing on different components of fitness, how may that benefit you more than something of really high intensity and high stress right now. Yeah. What can trainers and coaches do? I think from a sense of a power dynamics, when it comes in a fitness setting, it's important for trainers to recognize that they have such influence, right? They have such influence when it comes to everyone's overall perspective of what fitness is and how to incorporate it in their lives. I think the biggest one is encouraging people to listen to their bodies, that people truly are the experts in their own lives. And kind of expanding on that view, like the previous slide, like the reasons why you're doing this and how you're doing this. And what does listening to your body look like for you, and listening to those cues.
Yeah. I think even recognizing that your own kind of limits are going to change over time, like, so, and communicating that with someone that you trust, whether it's a coach, a trainer, and advocating for your own needs.
Yeah. Speaking up, yeah, for sure. Giving tons of options when it comes to working out, right? Not like, oh, like here's a progression and a regression. Here's option A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Let's go, right? So knowledge.
Yeah. That idea of flexibility. Yeah.
For sure. And on top of that, eliminating weigh-ins. Offer a variety of uniforms. Start to individualize training plans and recovery plans. And of course, education, staying up to date on relevant research as well.
These are just a few resources. The first one is talking about health at every size principles, which is amazing. If you haven't checked that out, definitely worth checking out. The next few are more so around sports, the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sports. So their kind of whole idea is really making sports safe for everyone. The Canadian Centre for Mental Health in Sport, again, really seeing that combination of mental health and fitness and sport. And then Game Plan is another one.
We've attached numerous resources for you, some evidence-based studies, and I really love Decolonizing Fitness. The examples of toxic fitness culture are expanded on top of that. I really recommend looking that up as well.
They're just references for pictures that are on there.
Sure. With 2 minutes to spare, we want to thank you so much for being here, and even being here and showing up to have this discussion with us. Courtney and I and the whole center are so passionate about this, of expanding our community's knowledge and what health looks like, and that health doesn't have a shape, size, or form, and developing a relationship with not only sport and fitness is such an important part and unique part of a recovery process, learning more about yourself. And I think it's important to also recognize that we have a long way to go, and there's hope. There's hope, and there's so many ways we can start to, question fitness and sport culture and things that we can do to improve our relationship with it.
I think it even just gives me hope seeing people here attending this and being willing and open to learning and going against the grain of what culture is telling us, I think is really, really cool. So thank you all so much for being here. And
if you contact us, I think that's probably what you're just going to say, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We have 1 minute left. Can always reach out to the center as well. And if you have any questions, admin would be happy to direct them to Becky and or myself. We can answer you by email if there's anything that comes up you forgot to reach out about. But thank you.
Yes, please reach out if you have any comments, feedback, concerns, or if you would like to expand on what we discussed today. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And we appreciate you. And Courtney, I'm looking forward to another conversation with you. I feel like this is a to be continued.
Yeah, I think we need to think about starting a podcast series or webinar series or something. So much unsaid.
Yeah. For sure. And please let us know if there's any other topics in the future that you would like us to consider, if it comes to toxic fitness culture and sport, or anything else in between. We love your feedback.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Friday.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Oh, a wonderful day.